Hello, hello, hello. My name is Robert. I am the recovery guy, and you have entered into The Fix.
Good afternoon, evening, good morning. This is Robert, the recovery guy, and this is a special podcast from the Saturday night speaker meeting at the South Davis Recovery Club. Relax, enjoy, and share. Have a great night. Thanks for listening.
Chaz, alcoholic.
Hey, Chaz.
You know, when I came here, I was unemployable, but there's one man that did employ me, and he regretted it at first. No, I do have some notes a little bit, so I might refer to them a little bit, but I just want to say thank you to the club for, holding this meeting. I know the speaker meetings can struggle a little bit. I've always had a pleasure heading them, and now we have you and Ricardo heading them, and so I appreciate that. I appreciate everyone that stayed, everyone that showed up to support me. I want to thank my wife, my sponsor, who couldn't make it. It's only by the grace of these people and God that I'm still sober today. I think a lot around this time of year, especially that, I rewind the tape a little bit because I come up, my sobriety day is 12/26/2016. And I reflect a lot during this time of year because I can't help but think of what life used to be like and how different life is today. And there's some moments that I remember like it was yesterday, and some moments it feels like it was a whole lifetime away, but a little bit of a backstory for me is, I grew up around drugs and alcohol my entire life. My mom was in and out of prison growing up. There were, many nights where we didn't know where she was, when she was going to come home. We didn't have food a lot of the time. That was just the lifestyle that, that was normal for me to be around that stuff. When she was running from the law, we would live in storage units and eat out of garbage cans. And she was a dumpster diver. So that was like, that was our norm growing up. But it was my norm, and I loved my mom still. When she went to prison, the last time we ended up living with our dad, or moving in with my dad, and he provided the nice house, the bedroom, the consistency with going to school, the structure, and all I wanted to do was be with my mom growing up. So whether that living like that with my mom and growing up like that formed me to being a drug addict, I don't know, because there was a long time that I swore up and down that I would never touch drugs or alcohol. And then I don't know what happens when you're a teenager and you just can't handle life. You can't handle the maybe it was the lack of connection that I wasn't getting from my mom no longer, and my dad just wasn't giving it. He was given punishments and beatings, and I craved that connection, and so when I discovered friends that were using, for me that was a way for me to regain control of my life because my dad couldn't tell me I couldn't do it, and it made me feel good. And it ultimately got me kicked out of my dad's house when I was 16, and I've been on my own ever since, and throughout my entire, teenage years from 16 until I was an adult, I was always had a friend whose parents loved me and they accepted me as one of their own, and they also enabled us to party and they enabled us to drink, and they didn't care what we did. And that's all I did. That's all I did literally until I got sober this time in 2016. I just kind of floated around and didn't really do much with my life. I had 2 kids in that time, and I got married in that time frame, and none of that mattered as much as using drugs and alcohol. I tried to get sober, and I never really had full sobriety. I'd go to a methadone clinic, and I would do the methadone treatment for a couple years, and I felt like I was somewhat normal. But ultimately, I still found myself wondering what it was like to be normal. I often would talk to a friend, like, what would it be like to just go about your day and not have to need to put something in your body? Because I didn't know what that was like, and it took a long, long time for me to finally feel what that was like. I toyed with that idea, and I walked the line of trying to get sober, not getting sober until probably around 2009. I just gave up, and I just said I'm going to use, but I couldn't work because I wasn't employable, and my kids, my oldest daughter's mom didn't want anything to do with me, really, is because I wasn't a good provider. I wasn't a good example for our daughter. So the best thing for me to do was to sell drugs so I could have drugs. And I did that, and I pretty much lived at the strip club for 4 years, playing pool and doing drugs and on repeat over and over and over again. And then, but I was always that user that was like, well, at least I'm not doing that, or I'm not doing that, so I'm okay, and I just would own, I thought owning what I was doing was justifying the means, I guess, like I didn't try to hide that I was using, I wasn't stealing from people, so I felt like I was above your average, like under the viaduct user. But every time, I just noticed, like, it first started with Adderall, and then, first it was like drinking, right? And then I didn't like how it always made me feel like my mind was clouded. So then I started doing the Adderall with the drinking. And then from there, the drinking stopped. And then it went from meth. And I wasn't shooting up meth, I was smoking meth, so it was okay. And then I found myself shooting up meth. And I was already an ex-heroin addict, but I wasn't touching it, so it was okay. But I started selling it. And that didn't last very long. I sold it for maybe a month before I touched it, and then I tried to do the whole week maintenance thing, and that didn't last very long either. Before I knew it, I was right back where I started, but worse. And I did that for 7 years straight. I didn't go a day sick. But that was my life. There was times where I had nowhere to go. I had my car, and I slept in my car. And the aloneness that I felt during that time of my life, I hope to never feel again. All the friends that I had would only call me when they needed something. And as soon as they got it, they would leave. And, I'd have my car all fixed up to where I could fall asleep in it in the winter, turn it on every, hour to kind of heat it up. And that was the life that I lived. And, it sucked, but I accepted it. I owned it. And I thought that made it okay. When on December 26th, 2016, I had no plans to get sober that day. I always had a plan, right? I always had some contingency plan that, if everything lines up in this order, that will be the day I get sober. But that never happened, I remember Christmas Day, I fell asleep in my car in the avenues, and it snowed, and my car was completely snowed in. I spent probably 5 hours trying to get my car out on Christmas morning, and I was sicker than a dog going through withdrawals. I finally got home, and I had just enough to keep me well till the next day, because no drug dealer works on Christmas. So, that next day, the 26th, I woke up and I was still going through withdrawals, and I was still sick, and I needed to get, re-up. And the girl that I was dating at the time decided that we were going to go to Utah County, and we were going to pick up this guy and go here, then go there, and the drill. And this crowd that she wanted us to go meet was a crowd that I would tell myself, I don't hang around those people, because I'm not that type, and I was above them. So we fought about it for a minute, but I needed to get well. So we drove all the way down there, picked him up, and he said, hey, let's go to this Walmart real quick. And we went to the Walmart, and he robbed some lady in the parking lot with a knife. And I'm curled up in a ball in the front seat. I'm not even driving the car, and I kind of come to, and I'm just like, what the hell's going on? And he jumps in the car, and he says, go, go, go. We drive right across the street from Walmart, and he goes inside Lowe's, and he uses that credit card that he stole to buy a bunch of stuff. And when he got back in the car, he said, the only way I'm going to help you re-up is if you go return these items that I just got, so we can get the cash. So I just grabbed the stuff, I walk inside, and I just see, cop lights reflecting off the mirrors around me, and I kind of look out, and I didn't really know what was going on. I do the thing, I go back out, and I just walk right through probably 15 police officers. My car's gone, and I'm trying to call the girl that I was dating. She's not answering. So I walk back into Lowe's, and next thing I know, there's probably 15 cops that surround me and put me, take me and put me in custody. And ultimately, that day I got charged with, I think it was like 11 felonies and 4 misdemeanors. I was very naive. I never been to jail before, and I thought that I'd be getting out of jail the next day. And so it didn't really, settle in. And my first night in jail was freaking horrible. I was very, very, very sick. And I remember talking to some guy in there, and he's telling me that, you're going to be going to prison, and that scared me. I didn't want to go to prison. And I played this whole going to court, every week, just to have it pushed out, thinking I'd get out, the next time I went to court. And, I was in maximum security for 2 months, and then they let me into general population for like 2 weeks. And then the judge, when it was finally sentencing day, I was really lucky, because the entire time I was in jail, I saw all these kids go in and out, the same freaking kids. And I'm like, where's my second chance? I'd never been to jail before. And I wanted that chance, and I was going to take advantage of it, And so talking to my lawyer, he thought that he could work something out. On sentencing day, that judge did not want to work anything out. He wanted to send me to prison with the rest of the people that I was with. Thankfully, the DA, he saw something in me that decided that he was going to go to bat for me, and he talked to the judge, and the judge decided to put me out on bail on house arrest, and I had to go to treatment, and I had to pay a fine, and I had to do a couple other things. And that was the beginning of the life that I live today. I hope one day I can thank that judge and let him know that second chance didn't go to waste. But I hit the ground running. I prayed every night when I was in jail for that second chance, and I was willing, and I told myself and God that I would do whatever it took to just live life. Life unfroze for me in jail. It took a minute because all I could think about was getting high the first few weeks, but eventually, life that I had wasted was catching up to me. All I could think about was my daughters. It'd been 7 years since I see my oldest daughter. My youngest daughter didn't even know who I was. And I wanted to make that right, and I knew that something in me knew that it was possible. I don't know where that hope came from. I don't know where the faith came from, but I knew that if I was given that chance that I could do it. So when I got out of jail, my little sister, God bless her, she moved me into her house. She said, "Don't worry about anything, just get better." And I didn't even know what that looked like. I had no clue. I just thought I had to go to treatment, So I was on a waiting list to get into treatment. And because it was county funded, I had to wait in line, and I had to go to a weekly, it was like 2 weeks, 2 days a week, some group therapy thing. And I thought that's what treatment was going to be like, and when I finally got into treatment, I was 4 months sober, I think, and I did a 9-month program, IOP program, and, I absolutely took advantage of it, and I took it serious, and I learned a lot from it, I remember having my first clean UA, and I was so excited and wanted to celebrate, not by using, that was the old Chaz, but I was really proud of that, and it felt good, and when I finished treatment, somewhere in between there was like 6-month mark. I was on Facebook, and this reminds me of Bill's story, but I was on Facebook and I saw this kid I used to deal drugs to, and he looked like a whole new person, and I couldn't help myself. I didn't like him really at all, but I had to ask him, like, what are you doing differently? Because I'm trying to change my life. And he asked he asked me my address, and he showed up at my house with a big book. And that day he took me to my first meeting, and it was at the Alano Club, the candlelight meeting. And, it's super dark, and I had no clue what the hell it was. I didn't know anything about AA at the time. And, but there was something about that meeting that just clicked with me. I don't know, it was the connection in the room amongst all the people there. I realized that I wasn't alone. And I think most importantly, like, I saw what sobriety could look like. Before, I just thought it was something I did on my own, and all I knew were the people that I hung around, the people that I grew up with, the lifestyle that my mom had. That's all I knew. And so to see that, being in recovery and working the 12 steps could look like what I saw, I knew then that it was possible. That's when I came to believe. Because there was something working there, and I didn't know what it was, and I was just willing to give it a try. So that friend of mine became my sponsor, my first sponsor, and he ended up he's my best friend today. He wasn't a very good sponsor. I remember, there were times where, like, he would, like, take a drink, and I'm just like, what are you doing, and his dad finally was like, hey, I think you need to find a new sponsor, and so I found a new sponsor, and that sponsor was very, militant, if you will. I really wanted to impress him. I really wanted to do a good job for him. So I spent like 3 months on my 4th step. And every time I'd call him and check in, he's like, hey, you're either going to do it or you're not, and that would always piss me off. It's like, what do you mean I'm either going to do it or I'm not? I am doing it. It's just taking me a minute. I want to make sure I get everything. And, and I went back as far as I could possibly go back in that 4th step. I was very, very thorough. So, I got through the first 9 with him. And that's when I ended up moving out here because of work. A friend of mine said that, hey, I know this guy, he needs some help with work, and you can sleep on my couch. And that's when I met Brett, and Brett was an intimidating guy back then. Most people may still think that about him, but I don't see that intimidating person anymore. I see a good friend, and I see a mentor, someone that's like a father figure to me. Moving out here was a game changer for me. This is where recovery really started for me. I was a year sober when I first came here, and I don't think I even knew what recovery was until I moved out here. I didn't even know what the fellowship was. I didn't connect with anybody or any group in Salt Lake City like I do here. So my journey here is, it's been one wild ride. It's not crazy. It's just, there's always something. I'm always doing something. I'm always achieving a goal. And it all started at this club, working with Brett and getting a new sponsor and working the steps all the way through with that sponsor. And I remember that sponsor, Brent, he, early on when I first met him, he was like, what's your 5-year plan? You need to write me a 5-year plan. And I remember I was I was at a softball game, and when he said that to me, and I just was like, what do you mean a 5-year plan? I don't even have my fucking driver's license. I can't come up with a 5-year plan, and but slowly and surely, I'd never created a 5-year plan, and I'm so glad I didn't, because I would have sold myself short, to be honest. When I first came out here, I didn't have anything. I didn't have a car. I had a couch that my friend was letting me sleep on. I had, somebody willing to hire me and give me a chance to make some money. But I kept in with AA. I kept working the steps, and I kept showing up, and I was, doing 2-a-day meetings sometimes. It really was my life. I'd go to work, and I would come here at the noon meeting. I'd go back to work. I'd get off. I'd go to the gym, and then I'd shower at the gym, and I'd be here at 7 o'clock. And that's what I did every day for the first 2 years of being here, But eventually, I needed to get a driver's license, And so I slowly just started picking away at the things that I needed to do, And one of them was getting right with my child support. I waited 2 years before I even reached out to my kids, and I attempted to reach out to, my oldest daughter's mom when I first got out of jail, and she's a lot smarter than I am, and said, I don't think it's a good idea, let's wait a while, and I can see why, If I were to show up, to my daughter's front doorstep early on in recovery and then just leave again, I don't know, it's hard enough to deal with it now, and I'm coming up on 8 years, and it's still something that I have to work through, and the guilt, but I waited, and I'm glad that I waited, and we wrote letters back and forth at first. So, there was things there was just so much to do, and I didn't know how I was going to do it, but I knew it was possible somehow, because that's what I saw in AA, and that's what I saw in the people in this room. They were able to get through all that stuff. So I knew that I could do it. And without even like realizing that I was doing it, I was slowly checking these boxes off, and I got my driver's license, and then I was paying my child support back, and I was working on my relationship with my oldest daughter, and I went and got my GED, and I met my wife now, but we met in recovery. We met at an AA meeting, and but then there came a day where I needed to decide what I was going to do for a career, and at the time I was doing contract work, doing fiber optics, hooking them up in houses, and that wasn't a career to me. I needed something more. I wanted to do something more. And so Tess's, mom, her husband is a firefighter. And at the time I was thinking that maybe I wanted to be a cop. I've always wanted to be a cop. I don't know why. But, I want to help people. That was the main motivation. But when I really thought about it, cops help like a very small amount of people, especially when it comes to what we do, like our history with drugs and alcohol. They don't really help. They'll throw you in jail, and you'll end up with a fine and some charges that will follow you forever. So Tess's mom's husband is a firefighter, and he told me, he said, why don't you come for a ride along and see what you think. I really liked the idea of being a firefighter. I remember as a kid telling my dad that I wanted to be a firefighter, and he told me that I would never become one. So, that's as far as that dream went. But when I went on that ride along, the camaraderie and the fellowship with the men in the crew was exactly what I feel here. And I really wanted to be a part of that. And so I just decided that I'm going to go for it. What do I have to lose? Little did I know it was going to be a long, hard journey. I thought I would just get, hired on. They'd train me on the job. But it came with, getting my GED, getting my advanced certifications, and going to fire school, and then getting hired on, and then going to another fire school. It was a very long, challenging process. And by the time I reached it, there was nothing that was going to get in the way. I worked really, really, really hard to obtain that goal. Sacrificed a lot of time at home with Tess and Weston, and suffered a back injury in the process that completely crushed my spiritual connection, my mental health. It was very, very challenging to get through that. I don't even think I would have gotten through it, honestly, sober, if it weren't for some of the guys in this room that came to my house and had a meeting in my house, because I was in too much pain to even walk, and I remember when I was in that fire academy, and the big talk amongst the cadre was if I was even cut out to do the job because of my back injury. And so every day I went thinking that was going to be my last day. And they finally had to talk with me about it. And then I told them, I said, either you guys carry me out of here, or you just let me show up and do my best and do what I got to do, because this, like, not becoming a firefighter, not completing this is not an option for me. And that was the last conversation we had. They wanted to hear that I wasn't going to use it as an excuse. They wanted to see that I had the drive and the passion and the commitment to do what it took. And I got through that camp, and I ended up getting surgery like 6 months later, and that's where the real mental struggle came from. I was 5 years sober then, and I feel like I was the sickest I've ever been in sobriety. And I want to say ever, because I didn't know what it was like to feel that sick sober. I always had something to, numb it out or block it out. And dealing with that, like I'd try and come here to the meeting. I'd walk here at noon, and I would leave just so irritated and pissed off. I'd call my sponsor and tell him, like, that fucking noon meeting, like, you have no idea how they're running stuff over there. And he would just say, well, why do you keep going to the meeting to get something? Why don't you bring something to it? You know, I'm just like, yeah, I know. You keep telling me the things I know, but it's not what I want to hear, you know? and I would go for my walks, you know, and I would be praying, and I'd be mad at God because of my current situation. And even though I had surgery and things were, you know, looking better, I still was not okay. Like, I still was not happy with where I was. And I didn't feel like anybody understood. You know, they can say, oh, you know, I get it, that must suck, blah, blah, blah. But do they really understand where I was? And truly, no. You know, no one really knows where anyone really is. And I had to reach a point where I had to surrender, just like I had to early on in recovery when I was in that jail cell, you know, and I had to surrender to the fact that I may not be okay, you know, that I may never get better. My back may always hurt, and I might lose my job. Once I could accept that fact and turn it over to God, things changed within a week. But I fought that, surrendering that like no other, and it made me so miserable. I learned a lot, you know, in that process, and my connection with my higher power grew immensely from that experience. You know, so early on in recovery, I think we all realize early on, at least I did, that I was powerless over drugs and alcohol. I knew that I couldn't stop using, and I knew that I'd give every excuse in the book to my mom, to my sisters, to my friends on why I was using and why it was okay, and that they didn't need to worry. You know, so I knew early on I was powerless, but I had not reached the hopeless state yet. You know, I always felt like I had control over it in some way or somehow, and that I could outsmart it or maneuver things how they need to be maneuvered to, you know, to convince people and convince myself really that I was okay. It took me being powerless and hopeless to really concede to my innermost self that I was an alcoholic and drug addict, and I had to make some serious changes. And one of those being that I could never use drugs again. I could never drink again. You know, and I think that those two things, we have to experience them together for us to have that understanding, you know. That's why a lot of us don't make that change until our lives crumble and we lose absolutely everything. We have nothing left, you know. When I came to believe, that was the power I saw in all of you guys, you know. The power that I saw in my friend when he showed up at my house. Something was there, something worked, and I didn't really need to know the details of it. I just needed to experience it. You know, I needed to try it, and I was willing to do that. You know, and talking about step 3, you know, I think that that's something that we struggle on. I mean, obviously early in recovery, where we always try to, you know, be the director of the show and make sure everything is falling in line with, you know, what we need in order to get what we need in order to stay better. And, you know, we are not really good at turning anything over unless it's turning something over to get what we want, you know. And today, I do the same thing, but it just looks different, you know. It's really, really hard to truly turn over absolutely every aspect of my life because of fear and ego and pride. You know, all those things still pop up today. And the longer I'm sober, the more aware of it I become. and I can practice working through those, those things, being in fear and understanding when my ego and pride are out to play, and because if those things are out to play, that's when I start being selfish. That's when I start being dishonest. That's when I am self-seeking. So, the only thing to truly get through that is just the awareness of those things and understanding that they're there, and not letting them dictate, my decisions that I make on a day-to-day. And, going through a 4-step, everyone's scared of the 4-step. And I've done a lot of them. I think I've done one every year I've been sober. And they've gotten smaller, but I notice a pattern that everything is surrounded around fear. When I have a resentment with somebody, or I feel like someone harmed me, it's fear is at the core of that. And whether that's a fear of me not getting what I want, that's a fear of them not reacting the way that I want them to react. The fear of not being able to accept that I might be injured and that I might lose my job. The fear is there, and it's in the big book. It's a cording thread that's shot through our existence, and that is for me completely true. It will always start with fear, and if I can identify where that is, I can start working through it. I can accept it at that point. And I just got done doing a 4th and 5th step with my new sponsor, and we kind of change it a little bit to it's my thinking. I don't have a drinking problem, I have a thinking problem, and a lot of it is based around not being able to turn things over, and still trying to control things, and still having expectations of people that aren't being met. When I think about step 9, I had some good experiences with step 9 and some bad experiences with step 9, and I would always, after my first horrible experience with step 9, I suggest to always do it with the guidance of a sponsor, because I did not, and I hate to even, I'm embarrassed to even talk about it really, because it caused a lot of harm and it caused a lot of pain, and it affected so many people, and I went and made an amends to my ex-wife, and in that process of making amends to my ex-wife and meeting my daughter, for the first time since she was 6 months old, was a very powerful experience for me, and I was convinced that I needed to mend the relationship with my ex-wife in order to have my daughter in my life. Me and Tess had been dating for probably a little over a year, I think. And I broke things off with Tess, and I started focusing on my ex-wife and my daughter. And I was miserable the entire time. All I could think about was being with Tess. And all I could think about was, am I doing the right thing? Am I doing the wrong thing? And it didn't feel right in my heart. But I kept having this idea that I needed to do this to have my daughter in my life. And that's when I learned to listen to my heart and not my mind, and I prayed and prayed and prayed about it. I still didn't have the guidance of a sponsor, but I had people in recovery that were, working the steps that I talked to, and I had to learn to just stop listening to my head and listen to what my heart was saying. And it took a little while for me to get there, but my heart was saying that what I was doing was not the right thing to do. What I was doing was causing more damage than good, especially for my daughter. Me and my ex-wife, we didn't work out for a reason, and we had no business being back together. And in the long run, it would have been very detrimental for my daughter and the relationship I had with my daughter. And unfortunately, I had to pay the price for this because I, told my ex-wife how I felt and that I didn't think that we should continue doing what we were doing. And she up and moved away to St. George, and now I don't really see my youngest daughter at all, and that's another thing that I have to carry with me, that I have to work through. And most of the time I feel like I do okay, and then I have moments where I get down on myself, and I feel bad for myself because I don't get to see my daughter, and but also understanding that I'm the cause of that, it makes it easier, I guess. It's not really matter what she's doing wrong, but I played a role in that entire thing, and I know that, so I definitely do a night step with the guidance of a sponsor, because it probably would have saved me from that. I wanted to read. How much time do we have?
You have another 10 minutes at least.
All right, I'll make this quick. So, doing the 4-step and becoming aware of like my character defects and the flaws and how I operated and the things that I was doing that weren't honest, and the things that were selfish, the things that I was doing out of fear and pride and ego, becoming aware of those things and working through them and changing them over a length of time in sobriety didn't happen overnight. It took a lot of patience and a lot of time and just showing up here every day and doing my best. I eventually reached a point, and someone shared it at a speaker meeting here, and they said the only person that you need validation from is the one looking back at you in the mirror. And a lot of people aren't a big fan of that quote. That quote hit hard for me because I think it's absolutely true, and I learned that by working the steps and making the amends and making the mistakes and getting the little wins that I got along the way. But I found this little poem that really puts that small quote in context that makes sense. And it's how I view that quote. And if some of you might have heard it, it's called The Man in the Glass. When you get what you want in your struggles for self and the world makes you king for a day, just go to the mirror and look at yourself and see what that man has to say. For it isn't your father or mother or wife whose judgment upon you must pass. The fellow whose verdict counts most in your life is the one staring back from the glass. He's a fellow to please, never mind all the rest, for he's with you, clear to the end. And you've passed your most difficult, dangerous test if the man in the glass is your friend. You may fool the whole world down the pathways of years and get pats on the back as you pass, but your final reward will be heartache and tears if you've cheated the man in the glass. Because of this program, because of the work that you put in, the commitment that you put in it, the willingness to grow, the willingness to evolve, the willingness to be honest with yourself when you're not your best self. Those are the things that make me happy with the man that I see in the mirror today. I never think about it until I read that prayer, but so many times when I was using it, I couldn't even stand looking at myself in the mirror. And today, I'm proud of that person, Moving on to a little bit about Step 10, my sponsor, he's a very impressive individual when it comes to AA and working the 12 steps. And he, has been rocketed into the fourth dimension, textbook, and he has brought this book to me. It's called The Unpopular Studies of the Last 3 Steps. And I love this book. I resonate with almost everything in it that I've read so far. But for me, what step 10 means is exactly what I'm going to read. And it says, it follows that every time we practice awareness in step 10, we are in the presence of God as we understand God. We are only able to watch ourselves at all because the watcher is not really us, but this power. To practice step 10 in this way is to be in an intimate relationship with God, to be one with God right here, right now. Step 10 for me is, it says it's a continuous process. And for a long time, I treated that like it was a continuous thing I had to do at night. At night, when we rest our heads at night, we do a personal inventory and we make note of all the persons we have harmed and talk to someone at once or made an amends at once. The problem with that for me is that at night I'm not, I may have a list, but by the morning I forget it. Or by the morning I think that it's not a big deal, so I just need to move on. To practice the awareness in step 10 throughout the entire day is not easy to do. But the more that I do it, the more that I practice the awareness of it, for me, the closer I feel to my higher power. The more aware I am of my thoughts and my actions and what I want to do and what I'm going to do. And with step 11, you practice praying for the guidance in those moments that you have, that step 10 thought where you think, oh shoot, did I just say something that offended whoever? Ask for guidance in that moment to handle that in the way that he would want you to handle it. For me, that's steps 10 and 11. I am on this new journey with steps 10 and 11, to be honest. I just started doing this a couple months ago with my sponsor, and it kind of blew my mind a little bit, realizing, this awareness of thoughts. And, my sponsor said one time in a meeting, he said, when I realized I wasn't my thoughts, my mind exploded, and I didn't really think about it at the time, but I'm sure you guys have all heard about the committee. We all have the freaking committee, and sometimes that committee sounds like Tess. Sometimes it's Brett, sometimes it's my dad or my mom, or sometimes it's me, and usually the committee is never telling me anything good. It's never telling me anything that I want to hear. It's bringing the self-doubt. It's instilling fear. It's telling me I need to be dishonest because of this or that, The committee is out to get you, And when I first started embarking this committee idea, I kind of felt a little crazy because I'm like, there's a lot of things going on up here. And there's a lot of parts of me that still come out, and there's parts of me back when I was using and drinking and being the drug dealer, that part of me is still in there. Thankfully, the new part of me and the AA part of me, the part of me that's connected to my higher power, that part is stronger today. And that's only because of the continuous work that I do to work this program to the best of my ability, and it's always changing. My program is always evolving and it's always improving, and I always need to be willing to put in that work to evolve and to be better. Some of the things that I want to finish up with is these are things that I've come to know by working the 12 steps of AA that will ensure my peace and my serenity. And the first one is that I'm not my thoughts. Just because I have a thought does not mean I need to say my thought. It does not mean I need to fill my thought or toy or give energy to that thought. It's just a thought, Being aware of it is the first step, and then deciding what to do with it is the next step. The second thing is acceptance is the answer. You know, there's there's a whole chapter in this big book, and it's one of my favorite chapters. I truly believe that I cannot start healing, I cannot start improving or getting better until I accept whatever it is. And that applies to absolutely everything in my life. I have to be able to accept it, and if I'm going to address it or move on. And the third thing is love and do without expectation. If I do something, I'm doing it out of love, I'm doing it for the free and fun of it, and I have no expectation attached to it. As soon as I start putting those expectations attached to it, I get resentful because no one's ever going to measure up to my expectations, you know. The fourth thing is the more I can be in the present, the closer I feel to God. Being in the present is super, super hard. That's where that step 10 practice comes from, you know, being aware. And the final thing is no matter what, I need to stay connected in some way, some shape or form. You know, if I lose connection to AA, the fellowship, the people that I've met in these rooms, I will lose my connection to my higher power. That is a fact. The further away I've gotten from this place, the further away I get from my higher power. And if I'm not connected to my higher power, he's not the one that's moved. It was me that moved. And I can feel it, you know. I mean, when I was in Fire Academy, I went months without coming here, and I did not feel connected. So those are the key points for me that I got to take forward. That's all I got.
Thank you, man.
As we do every Saturday, I want to give you this certificate for speaking here and being a part of our recovery.
Awesome, thank you.
On Saturday night. Thank you, brother. Appreciate it very much. Thank you. Before we close, you know, I always love to hear Chaz's story because it's a person reinventing himself, utilizing the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. And so often we don't realize what we have until we come to an understanding of who God is and how God wants to bless us and encourage us as we become willing to turn our will and our life over to the care of God. And there's a story of a man who thought he had no life. And he went to God and he said, God, I have no life. What am I going to do? And God says, well, give me everything you have and I'll give you a life. So the man says, well, all I have is $20. And God said, give me the $20 and I'll give you a life. And the man said, well, if I give you the $20, I won't have any money to put in my car for gas. And he said, oh, you have a car. He said, well, give me the $20 and give me the car and I'll give you a life. And the man says, well, if I give you my car and $20, I won't have any way to get to my job. And God says, you've got a job. He said, well, give me the $20, give me the car, give me the job, and I'll give you a life. And he said, well, if I don't have a car and I don't have the $20 and I don't have a job, how am I going to pay my mortgage? He said, oh, you own a house. He said, well, give me the house, give me the job, give me the car, give me the $20, and I'll give you a life. And he said, if I give you my car and I give you my house and I give you my job, where's my family going to live? And he said, oh, you have a family. And he said, well, give me your family, give me your house, give me your car, give me your job, give me your $20. And the guy got so tired of arguing with God, he gave him the $20, gave him his car, gave him his job, gave him his house, gave him his wife. God says, here's a house, here's a family, here's a car, here's a job, and here's $20. Now you got a life. And that's what the program of Alcoholics Anonymous does for us. We take what little we have and give it to God, and God gives us back as if we never understood we had it in the first place. And that's what's so exciting about your marriage, about your life, about your reunion with your children, being the stepdad for Weston that he's always needed, and watching you rebuild yourself. And I am blessed by you.